What's up, guys? Welcome back to Basara 3! Alright, we're moving on to a brand new character, and this time we're going to be playing as Date Masamune, the big boss of Oshu. For the first time since Basara 1, so I'm really excited about this. We're finally going to get to see Masamune in a new Basara game. He was the very first character that we played as in the very first Basara game that I Let's Play. This is the same opening cutscene as we had with Magoichi. I'm going to be quiet for the opening exposition crawl, and then we're going to explain what's going on.
In an attempt to seize the Kanto region, Lord Hideyoshi launched an attack on the Hojo clan's Odawara Castle, a fort renowned for its impenetrable construction. Upon receiving word of this, Masamune Date headed to Odawara in hopes of persuading Hideyoshi not to invade north of the Kanto region. Masamune wished to be left alone so that he could continue his own plans to take over the country without rivalry. Unfortunately, Hideyoshi ordered Mitsunari to decimate Masamune's forces. Masamune fled his home, leaving the Oshu region vulnerable. As time passed, Hideyoshi's firm hold over the land began to waver until he was finally defeated by Ieyasu Tokugawa. Consequently, the country fractured and a new race for dominance began. Amid the turbulence, a vengeful Masamune set out to settle his score with Mitsunari Ishida.
Mitsunari Ishida.
Lord Masamune.
What's the news, Kojiro?
It's bad. It's critical that we stop the chaos in Oshu as planned. We must also strengthen the nation's resources. Mitsunari, of course, now ranks equal with Ieyasu, and is one of the two pivotal players. At this rate, we won't be able to defeat him.
Ieyasu. Figured he had to grow up sooner or later.
It feels endless, I know, but it's the best option available.
Right, I get it. You filled me in enough.
Alright, so in terms of the story with Masamune this time around, so this is where Judge End starts to become the more faithful adaptation of this game compared to the movie, because, again, this follows the same story as what Judge End portrays, where we see Masamune going to intercept Hideyoshi, and then Mitsunari gets in their way and just hands him and Kojiro their asses, which is honestly one of my least favorite things about the way that Judge End begins. I didn't much care for seeing them having their asses handed to them, including all the blood and everything, like right off the bat. But we're joined by Kojiro, obviously, voiced by Travis Willingham in the English. Now we finally get to hear him in dub. Masamune's voice actor, though, is actually not the same voice actor as he is in the anime, which I thought was an interesting decision, honestly. And honestly, the voiceover in the game does work just fine. He's still a really good voice. But it doesn't really portray the level of excitement and enthusiasm and the over-the-top delivery that Masamune is known for. So I kind of prefer the anime voice as well. Not to mention, Masamune is kind of down and out in Basara 3. Like, he is driven by blind anger and revenge on Mitsunari, which is the complete opposite of the way he was in the movie, because in the anime's continuity that ties into Basara the Last Party, it was actually Masamune who defeated Hideyoshi instead of Ieyasu, which means that not only is Masamune sitting on the top of his game by the time the movie starts, but Mitsunari has a grudge against Masamune instead of Ieyasu. He still doesn't like Ieyasu, but Ieyasu is more of an annoyance than anything else. And that worked for the plot of the movie, especially because we see that, because Masamune had just come off of that fight, Mitsunari does have the ability to defeat him. So, but through a series of technicalities, we do get a rivalry with them, but it's not quite as bitter and character damning as the rivalry we get in Judge End, where Masamune just makes piss poor decisions throughout the series and just gripes and complains, and it's really not a great portrayal of Masamune, and it's even a worse portrayal of Kojiro, because after that initial fight and Masamune being defeated, Kojiro has to essentially carry Masamune and his troops out of that encounter and try to avoid confrontation every turn afterward, which results in Kojiro basically having to embarrass himself in front of Kenshin when Kenshin is, you know, going to get in their way and is not going to offer them safe passage without a fight, and Kojiro basically has to beg and plead for Kenshin to let him pass, which I think is just disgusting, frankly. I hate that they had to do that to those characters. And I just think it's one of the many reasons why I just think Judge End is a very poor story in terms of Basara. But anyway, let's talk about Masamune in terms of gameplay. So a lot of Masamune's core combat sandbox is actually the same as how it was in Basara 1, but highly refined. And if you guys had the opportunity to play as Masamune in Basara 2, you would understand the gradual changes over time. So I do not have all of his abilities unlocked right now, obviously. So I don't have War Dance or Magnum Step right now, which I'll be getting those eventually. We unlock moves the exact same way we do with the other characters in Basara 3, which means I'll need to unlock them essentially one at a time. So we have the Cross Slash, and we have it's not Dragon Fang, it's the whatever the other one is. So we have the upward swipe that he does with all three of his Dragon Fangs in one hand. And then we have the follow-up to that, where if we're standing still, he'll do the cross slash, which is where he spins around and slashes downward. And what you can actually do, as you saw me do a little bit earlier, is you can transition that into another series of combos. So you can use, normal melee attack your combo as far as you can get it, and then you can do the upward slash. And after you've done that, it then, as soon as you have all three of, it's kind of similar to when you equip the different weapons with Magoichi. Essentially, when you do that upward slash with three of his Dragon Claws in his hands, he then has all three of them equipped, and you can do a different series of combos with the square button that way, which I think is really cool. And it looks awesome, it deals a ton of damage, it's very difficult to block, and it just makes Masamune flow so much better than if he were to not have that. You know, in which case he would be swinging a single sword around, which I know has been par for the course for Masamune for the entire game series, but it's still kind of awkward considering that, you know, especially if you're used to Masamune in the anime almost always using at least more than one sword at a time. You know, if he has 6, why would he even bother to use one at a time? Well, unless you actually apply logic to it, which would mean that it's very difficult to hold 6 swords at once, but we won't go there. Anyway, so, I mentioned in the previous video that, well, I guess I should talk about this stage a little bit and talk about where we are. So we are in the graveyard stage, which I have foreshadowed to quite a bit throughout the game so far, and we're finally getting to go there. So this guy got defeated quite a few times in the other campaigns, and so I knew that I was going to have to fight him here in Masamune stage because he's accessible right at the very beginning. And so I figured I would go after him and actually show him off on screen, but I definitely hope that I don't have to fight this guy anymore afterward. So we just used Masamune's Basara attack there, and again, after you use his attack, his Basara attack is really good as it is, but after you used it, you will have all 6 Dragon Claws equipped like you would when you have a War Dance, so you can continue to attack using those, which I think is awesome.
As I've said, we must
if you remember from Basara 1, I was playing on the ultimate difficulty, and Masamune was really good at that difficulty because you could sit there and set up War Dance, which would allow you to deal a ton of damage and get through certain enemy groups without running the risk of being defeated easily. Because there were like very tough enemies like halberdiers and pikemen and things like that. They were just really, really, really tricky. So we don't have to deal with that as much in Basara 3, where there's no real difficulties. Well, there are difficulties, I guess, but the game definitely does not expect you to go for hard mode right off the bat. So that's good at least. I would definitely like to go back and try Basara 2 and 2 Heroes on hard mode, though. I think that would be really good. But we'll stick with one thing at a time here. Wow, Masamune's Fury Drive gauge is already full, too. I guess that's the difference when you have a melee unit. I never really fill up Magoichi's Fury Drive gauge all that much. Although, I did use it in the last video against Hojo, I think I used it. I was air juggling somebody with it, I know, with the pistol. That's all I know. Ain't nothing gonna stop this dragon. Yeah, so Masamune is definitely one of my favorite characters in the series. Obviously, I mean, you pretty much have to like Masamune if you're into Basara at all, but he has this very arrogant, smug, overconfident, cocky attitude that is definitely kind of a shonen trope, but it doesn't come across as annoying. It actually comes across as quite endearing as a result. And there's something very charismatic about Masamune that you definitely want to see him succeed, especially in the anime's continuity. And Masamune, in terms of real history, was kind of a little shit, which is why he's so infamous as he is. So Masamune participated in a number of battles during the actual Sengoku conflict, but he never really made a permanent alliance for longer than it needed to count. Although he was on the side of Ieyasu during Sekigahara, and he also participated in a battle with Mori, if I remember correctly. I'll have to double check my sources on that. But yeah, Masamune is featured in a lot of different fiction, much in the same that Oda Nobunaga is, even though arguably I would say that he's not quite as important to the history of the Sengoku era as the other characters we see in the game are. But that being said, he's definitely a very known historical figure, and his iconic helmet crescent there, the moon-shaped crescent on his helmet is, well, as I said, iconic. And we see the name Masamune applied to so many other things in fiction, such as legendary swords, a la Final Fantasy, and things like that. So we definitely know his legend is very well renowned. Alright, so time to fight the boss of this stage, which is a guy named Harumasa Nanbu, I think is how you say it. And he is some weird spiritual channeler, and he brings people back from the dead. So, yeah, Harumasa Nanbu. So, he is, again, some kind of spiritual channeler that brings people back from the dead, which, again, is not something that is uncommon within certain Japanese fiction. So, you can see we have all these zombie-type enemies everywhere. There's a lot of depictions in certain Japanese fiction of, like, possessed armor and things like that, and reanimated, like, clay dolls, and just weird stuff like that. So, he's not terribly out of place for that reason. So, very interesting stage. It's very dark and mysterious and very foreboding, and definitely a fitting start for Masamune's campaign, I definitely feel like so. But, the enemies also that he resurrects right here during the boss stage are quite tough, and they just kind of lumber slowly over towards us, and they can tank a lot of damage. Other than that, they're your typical heavy, like, occupational chief type enemy with the polearm. Oh, he's going to use his Basara attack here, which I can't say I even know what it does. Oh, he's sending all the souls after us, all the souls that were in those bodies, and we took a bit of damage from it, but now we have our Basara attack ready, so he's about to feel the bite of the dragon. Yeah, he's not terribly strong, and he relies on a lot of gimmicks, which is a good thing, I guess, for us for our warm-up stage, so to speak. He's also not playable in the game, and he's not playable in Basara 4 either. He's just another one of those side piece generals that we don't really care too much about in Basara 3. And it's funny, like, how many characters we've gotten up to by the time of Basara 3. You would think they wouldn't even have the need to add so much filler and so many like fluff characters just to fill out the conquest mode. But honestly, I don't think it detracts from the game at all to have those little side generals that we don't care about, because, you know, each campaign is eight fights long, so we get to take advantage of that.
Can't stand still forever. My patience wears. Suppose it's for the best. I can wait a little longer. Just you wait. Soon you'll feel my claws.
Alright, not bad for a warm-up.